Hello, 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 everyone, my beautiful people. My name is Shaylin Scott, founder of Book Mecca, an online Black bookstore and literary resource for all things Black lit. I am here today for our breakthrough series. We do this once a month, and we have a nationally known author come on who is breaking ground and breaking down barriers and breaking the molds when it comes to literary work from Black authors across the US. And today we have a very special guest with us. If you have not already, because I have been warning you and warning you to get the book, you should definitely get the book. I'll show you exactly which one it is. These Ghosts Are Family. Maisy Card. If you have not gotten it yet, check it out. You can purchase the book at bookmecca.org or any of the local bookstores, preferably independent. And we'll be interviewing with her today, finding out all about her work, her inspiration, as well as a little bit into depth of the author and her work itself. So we look forward to it. So without further ado, I will introduce Miss Maisy Card. She is the author of the novel These Ghosts Are Family, which was shortlisted for the Center for Fiction's first novel prize, the Penn Hemingway Award for debut novel, and the Art Cited, I'm messing this up, Seidenbaum Award for first fiction. Her writing has appeared in the Paris Review Daily, Lenny Letter, AG&I, New York Times, Guernica, and other publications. Maisie was born in St. Catherine, Jamaica, but was raised in Queens, New York, and she's currently a fiction editor for the Brooklyn Whale. So without further ado, let me bring her on up. Welcome, welcome, Maisie.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that a lot of our followers, which everyone on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, you'll get this shortly afterwards, but you'll be able to watch this replay as well and have all the questions. And if you guys have any questions for Maisie too, feel free to put them in the chat. Our chat will be open for you guys as well. So let me tell you a little bit about the book. These Ghosts Are Family. You see, I got all my notes with me. So I'll give you a synopsis, you guys. Stanford Solomon's shocking 30-year-old secret, 30-year-old secret, is about to change the lives of everyone around him. Stanford has done something no one could ever imagine. He's a man who faked his own death and stole the identity of his best friend. And that's just the small part of the book. He faked his own death, stole the identity of his best friend, and he's actually Abel Paisley. And now, nearing the end of his life, Stanford's about to meet his firstborn daughter, Irene Paisley, a home healthcare aide who's unwittingly shown up for her first day of work to tend to her father, who she thought was dead. And like I mentioned, that's a snippet. So, just to start at the beginning, Maisie, is this your first novel or is this one of many for us?
Yeah, it's my first novel, the first novel I was able to complete. But yeah, I'm working on another one now.
Wonderful. I heard it took you 12 years to write this.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't writing constantly. I had a lot of jobs at certain times, and I kind of fit it in where I could. And then sometimes I think I was just became like kind of dejected, about where it was going, and I would put it away, and then I would come back and I would kind of decide to make a really drastic change. Every time I picked it up again.
So when you started writing the book, because this is a lot of history, I'm a fan of historical fiction and anything that's kind of like on the brink of, and you weaved so many generations and you went back in time and forward in time, back and forth, but you did it so with ease. Was this based on the history and the research that you did yourself, or how did you do that?
Yeah, I incorporated a lot of research. I think when I started writing it, I didn't intend for it to be a novel, and I didn't intend for it to really be historical at all. I think I started writing stories that were based on either memories that I had as a child from, the times I was in Jamaica, or, just family stories I had heard. And, but while I was writing the novel, I read a lot of Jamaican fiction or Caribbean fiction, I read a lot of African American fiction too, and a lot of nonfiction. I think sometimes when I would read, because I was teaching, I'm a librarian, but in addition to doing that,
Mhm.
I've taught African American lit at community college where I live here in Newark. And I would read books set during specific periods of time, like slavery, the slavery era, for example, and just think how did this, what was it like in Jamaica? Where were
Yeah.
we during this time? Like, was it different? Was it harsher? Was it easier? And I just had a lot of questions that I wanted to answer. And to some extent, it's the research. It just became fun, to learn
Mhm.
more and more and more. And it just slowly kind of found its way into the book.
That's beautiful. So when you started digging into and starting from some of the memories that you had from Jamaica and some uh, history that you found on your own family and kind of weaved it into the book, did you want to turn it into something autobiographical or a memoir of your family, or you wanted to keep it more fiction?
No, I wanted to keep it fiction, just because I think one of the things that I realized that the book was kind of in response to was the fact that we have so many questions in our family. There's so many unanswered questions, or so many relatives or ancestors that we don't know anything about.
Mhm.
And I think I part of the reason I wrote this book was in response to that frustration, and all those missing pieces. So I kind of just decided to fictionalize, and also in response to like maybe just general silence, kind of a pattern of silence that I noticed in my family. And there were just a lot of questions that I couldn't ask my family. So I think I just wrote. I just kind of got catharsis out of writing this fictional family.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that, and I'm pretty sure a lot of our viewers can too. In the Black community, there's so many secrets. That's what the title, when I first saw your book, is what intrigued me the most. These ghosts are family. I kept thinking, like, what does she mean by that? Is this a supernatural book? And then I kind of read into it. I'm thinking, that is kind of true because I don't know a lot of my history. There are more questions than there are answers behind it. And I think I had read in one interview you did, one of the writers had said that a family story is sort of like a ghost story. It changes and it turns into fairy tales. Some parts become bigger than life. Some are not even believable anymore.
Yeah.
So is that kind of where the title came from for you too?
Yeah. Like I was just kind of playing with that theme of being haunted, and one of the things I wanted to explore was kind of generational trauma and how it kind of manifests in our life, or it could be recent trauma, something your parents experienced that they never told you about, but that you somehow were able to see at times, when they were raising you, and then trauma from history, from slavery, from colonialism, from immigration, and from the path, different paths our ancestors took. So yeah, I wanted to show that through literal hauntings. I wanted trauma to kind of shapeshift and kind of manifest um, in the characters' lives, and I used like tropes from horror fiction or horror movies, all throughout.
Wow. So tell me a little bit about this character here. I don't know if you guys can see that. The little cat in a dress. Where did that come from?
I really love the cover because I didn't expect them to, because I know not all covers are really like directly visualize the content of a book, but I
Mhm.
think this one did, which I thought was really great. So there are these three little girls in the book who go missing, and they kind of show up at another part of the book, and they have like supernatural powers. They're basically turning into these figures from Caribbean folklore, and so one of the things they can do is shapeshift into cats. So I thought that was cool when I saw that the author, the artist who had made the book cover, actually pulled that out of the book and put it on the cover.
I love that. Love that. So tell me, you had mentioned you had read a lot of Jamaican authors and Caribbean authors. Are there any that kind of influenced you in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, a lot of Wide Sargasso Sea is a very famous post-colonial novel, and so that's probably one of my favorite books. And then also just the general work of Michelle Cliff, who's a Jamaican author who also taught in the United States. Um, Roger Mays, there's a section that is set during 1966, and it's when Haile Selassie, the Emperor of Ethiopia, came to Jamaica for the first time. And that was, that's kind of considered an important moment in Rastafarian history. And so, I read a lot of novels that I wanted to read novels written by Jamaicans who living during that time, who were representing Rastafarians in fiction. So I read Brother Man by Roger Mace, and
Okay.
some other novels too. And also other Caribbean writers, like I love Edwidge Danticat, Polly Marshall. Yeah, there's so many. I'm blanking, but yeah, there's a lot of people who inspired this book, I would say.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
one
great.
of my favorite books too is the Dragon Can't Dance. I don't know if it inspired it, but I just, his writing in general, by Earl Lovelace, like Earl Lovelace's fiction, inspires me also.
I love how you have so many examples of books behind you. As a librarian, I'm sure you just constantly like, oh, I have to get this one. Your TBR
Yeah,
list is like miles long.
yeah, and there's a lot of African American or just Black fiction that really inspired it too. Like Incidents in the Life of a Colored Girl,
Mm,
Passing by Nella Larson, the autobiography of an ex-colored man, everything by Toni Morrison. Those were
yeah.
all inspirational to me too.
And I said that is something that I have seen a lot more recently, especially since this summer, on Instagram and Facebook. A lot of the books that um, maybe was maybe were popular a while back recirculated and coming back, and people are finding out who these authors are, and I am just loving every bit of it. I know your book circulated on Instagram a lot. Every time I looked up, someone was either sharing it, they were reading it somewhere in someone's book nook. It was great to see, and I think that's the beauty of the time that we're in, and I'm hoping that it continues, and it's not just a moment, but it's more of a movement, and it's just normal to read diverse books, read something that's a little bit different than yourself. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah, especially now, I think too, because a lot of works are, now being represented on the screen, and as TV shows, and I saw that they're turning Monster, the Walter Dean Myers novel, into a
Yeah.
movie now. There's a lot that people are rediscovering, I think, through cinema as well.
So what was it that led you from writing and editing into I'm going to finish a book. I'm going to publish a book. Was there something that was that trigger for you?
I think I did go to an MFA program. I went from 2006 to 2009. But I don't think I don't think the program specifically emphasized publishing as much as just the craft of writing.
Mm.
So I really didn't know what to expect when I was through, and I did at first try to publish short stories, and I got a lot of rejections.
Oh.
Um, but at the same time, those getting those rejections and going through the process kind of inspired me to keep at least having a goal. And I guess it was
Hmm.
when I started to get acceptances and was able to publish a few short stories that I felt a little bit more determined. And I also like kind of kept taking non non credit writing classes after I finished the MFA
Okay.
a couple years after. Like I took a class in 2015 with Victor Laval, the writer Victor Laval,
Mm.
at the Center for Fiction, and I just felt like it was kind of like a low point where I was like, should I keep doing this or should I give up? But yeah, that class was very inspiring, and I decided to, and he was very encouraging, so I decided to keep going.
That's
And
great.
then yeah, a couple years later, I got an agent, which also gave me a boost.
And I know that's a common theme I hear from a number of authors. You have that inner voice going, oh my God, I've been working on this forever.
Yeah,
Or someone, they don't like this part, but I really love this character and going back and forth. But when it was all completed and done, because you kind of pulled some of the information from your family history, what did your family think about the book?
I don't think my family necessarily sees the connection. Um,
Okay.
Yeah, and also I don't think my parents read it, to be honest. But they
Oh
give it away.
no.
They give it away to a lot of people. They said they mail it to a lot of people, but I don't think they've read it. But my aunts and uncles, I think they're just happy that, a book has, the family name on it,
Oh yeah.
um, more than anything. Yeah, I think sometimes when people recognize them, when they think something's real in the book, they'll tend to think it's usually wrong. You know what I mean? Like my
Hmm.
sister thought she was in the book and she's not at all in any way.
Oh, so she
And
was asking, that's not how it happened.
yeah.
I
But
get that.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely inspired by my family, but it's very fictionalized. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I do like some of my family in Jamaica did feel like they were surprised that I knew that much about Jamaica because I was
Hmm.
raised here. They didn't think that I guess could replicate like the language or the culture, and they were surprised
Yeah.
by that.
Did you go back and forth or visit frequently and kind of do the research there, or was it mainly from reading in the archives that you used?
I did start going to, I think partly me deciding to write this book was inspired by me starting to go to Jamaica again. Like there was a long period after my grandmother died when I think I was like 10 or 11 where I didn't go again till probably 8 years.
Wow.
And so when I was in college, I started to go with my father. And I had never met his side of the family. So we started to go like every year or every other year. So I guess meeting that family. And actually one thing that I would say is real or whatever that I based the I put in the book was going to his village, his little town
Mm-hmm.
in like rural Jamaica. My father's from Frankfield, Jamaica. And when I went there, I realized, there are cards there going back for generations,
Oh,
and so I had never been to a place where, it felt like a home, it felt like a home, some place that had been home to our family for such a long time. So I kind of wanted to, um, yeah, to have that in a book to be like, so that's why the Herald town, which is a fictional town,
mm-hmm.
is mentioned multiple times in the book. That's kind of like the beginning of the Paisley family where they started.
Wow. That's now one of the characters in your book kind of makes me think too. She took the DNA ancestry test there, and you took it as well. I
Yeah, I
did
did.
too. What did you discover when you took the ancestry?
um I think I discovered a lot. I actually like found family like
Really?
yeah, like a couple people have contacted me. Like I found yeah, cousins that had been kind of adopted and didn't know how we were related, and we kind of figured it out. I found cousins that I never met. And also I think one of the things that I really wanted to know was more about my grandfather's life.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was very like mysterious and he had like a lot of different stories about, his family origin or even his ethnicity. And it was always very confusing. So, that kind of shed a lot of light. And then I saw like actually spoke to people who were, whether they were fourth or fifth or sixth cousins, they were related, and I was able to kind of piece together his lineage and kind of to see that there was this kind of myth that had been retold and retold in my family across generations that was not true at all. So I wanted to. I don't think some of my family is happy that I found this out, but I kind of wanted to like kind of uncover those myths.
Oh, sounds kind of similar to the story
Yeah,
here. Uncovering these, well, decades long
secrets and yeah.
secrets that are just, and I think every family has kind of those, probably not as bad as Stanford's, but him pretending to be someone, I kept thinking it, how? Like, how? I'm sure he doesn't look exactly like that person. Did his family, did no one notice? I kept thinking, it kept just dawning on me like that was just a way of, but there was a common theme from a lot of your characters in your book, this theme of wanting to remove themselves from the situation that they were in, wanting to start over or start fresh and not be in the place that they were. Did that come from, well, did that come from current events? Because a lot of it kind of feels like the space that we're in now, especially during the pandemic. You kind of just want to just be away.
Yeah, I think it started because I was kind of just reflecting. When I immigrated to America, I came with my I was we were kind of the I was we were the first people on my father's side of the family, and very early on, my grandfather actually came first, and he brought my mother and my brother and I over. And we came with two uncles, and then slowly all of my mother's family just started to come to America. But I guess I was just reflecting as an adult how the relationships have changed, how close we
Mhm.
were in the beginning, and how America has just changed kind of just
Yes.
changed people, and some people have just drifted away, and we completely lost track of them, and we don't, and so a couple of people have surfaced like decades later, and they were going through a lot of things we didn't realize. Yeah, so I was just kind of reflecting on what caused that fracture in the family, what caused people to want to start over, want to
Mhm.
kind of disassociate with our family. And so I think thinking of answering that question brought up like a lot of hard truths and hard secrets and memories. And I think when you're young, you can't really see the tension underneath.
Mm. Yeah.
And you can't really understand. You might see somebody being a relative being angry, but you don't understand the root cause of that anger. And I guess I was just kind of thinking about those kind of different emotions that a lot of people must have been suffering in silence, with
Mhm.
for like all those years. And so I kind of wanted to explore it through, these relationships between these fictional characters.
It's so interesting how even if you're so young and just observing the actions of family members and the surroundings, you can learn so much and it stays with you. I think there
Yeah.
was a part in the book here. I'm gonna try and find it here. Where is it? I have so many notes as you can
Mhm.
tell. There was one part where it mentioned that it's the thought of evil being passed down. That one kind of stuck with me. Generational trauma is something that's been talked about, I mean, forever, it seems like. Um, and it kind of felt like these characters, although they seemed like they were disconnected from each other, they were very connected and didn't even know it. And a lot of the trauma was passed down. I'm not really sure. Have you ever experienced, or did you have any feedback from family, or not family, but from readers who felt really attached to that part of it? It felt as if it was speaking to them when it came to generational things that they didn't even know, but yet they felt
Yeah,
attached.
some people have like DM'd me and and told me about some secrets that they found out like around that coincided. They found it out just like while they were reading this book. Yeah, it's been really interesting to hear that side of it. And I think one person DM'd me and just said she was reading it with her mom and grandma. And
Really?
that really moved me. I didn't, I think they were reading it out, or she was reading it out loud to them. Yeah, and I that's something that really appealed to me post publication. It's like I like that it can encourage people to have like difficult conversations, or it encourage
Yeah.
people to parents or grandparents to share more of themselves, or children to ask questions that they probably were
Hmm.
uncomfortable. Because I'm uncomfortable. I've always been uncomfortable asking certain questions, but I've been sneaky. So I
Just
just kind of
find
like,
out.
yeah, I just like listen, and that's kind of how I found things out. I just listened and overheard things and put one or two pieces together, or my mother would just suddenly reveal something when she was in a certain mood, and so yeah, so that the book is kind of a reflection of how we learn about our family history.
Hmm.
And I'm glad that's resonating with people, and that they're kind of using it as a way to kind of process their own family
Yeah.
legacies and secrets.
It definitely motivates you to do that, because I started looking through my DNA list. Like, I do have a lot of cousins. I don't know. Maybe I should reach out to them. Maybe I should figure out how we're connected. But I don't know if
Yeah,
this happened with you, but with the when I looked through my DNA test, I hoped that there would be ledgers or there would be a book. Uh, Probably not as in depth and graphic as the book in here, but that there would have been something that told me more about the links to my family members, and there wasn't. So that was probably
yeah.
the most disappointing part.
Yeah, it's hard because it's also uncomfortable to kind of like, because I'm very obsessed with it, and now I've made my mother take a DNA test. I made my father take one last week. Because I just it's still a puzzle, and it's probably like a puzzle that I'll be putting together for the rest of my life. But we're making progress. So, but yeah, it's uncomfortable to reach out to a stranger essentially and
Yeah.
kind of ask them personal questions about their family. But it's so like illuminating, and I'm also paranoid about like giving a company your DNA,
Mm,
but it's still like so like like recently somebody contacted me who was an, for her father, and she said her father is Igbo and he's Nigerian.
okay.
He's never come to America, so he that's the first glimpse I've gotten of our ancestors pre-slavery. I didn't know that I was Igbo until
Mm,
that person contacted me. And so, it's there's so many things that would be impossible to know without the DNA.
yeah. So when you learned that, were there any other shocking revelations you found out in your DNA, similar to in the story here? She found out, oh, well, something else is going on. There are a lot more in my family who don't look quite like me.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think I also, it's hard to say because when you write something for 12 years, it's like you have so many different sources of inspiration, and
Mm,
it's kind of like layered. But, I think one of the things I was thinking about when I started writing it was just how complicated like Jamaican family
oh,
trees can be, Caribbean family trees can be, not only just not because of slavery, but also I think because of the illegitimacy that kind of happened as a result of, like, I think that's one of the generational legacies, the
hmm,
kind of and that happened in my family. So my grandfather had a lot of women, and so he had like a lot of my aunts and uncles are kind of half my mother's half siblings from different mothers, and everybody got along, or everybody
big
appeared to
family.
get. Yeah, it's a big family, so everybody appeared to get along when I was young, but as when I got older, I realized that that it was very complicated and feelings were very, very complex.
Yeah.
um yeah, so I kind of wanted to represent that in the book. But what I found out too was that this kind of that my grandfather behaved, I guess one of the questions I asked was, why did he do this? Because I think people just accepted it, but I realized my grandmother was hurt. She was, it really she grieved him, like basically when he left for somebody else. And I think one thing I learned was that his father did something similar, and then his
Mm,
father did something. You know what I mean? So it was kind of this learned behavior that just got kind of passed down. And I learned that by looking at marriage certificates and talking to relatives that I met through the DNA sites.
and speaking of family members that have been hurt from the choices and the decisions that they made, um, Stanford's decision definitely hurt family members down the line, especially his daughter. But there was his wife, Miss. She is one character. I loved her, but I didn't love her.
Yeah.
Miss Vera. She was a difficult character to like. I was moved to trying to figure out why she was the way she was. Was this what was her character based on, or how did she seem like she constantly made the wrong choices?
Yeah. I wanted her to be kind of an enigma. Um, I think I wanted to mirror the way I kind of learn about family, like dead family or deceased family. And I realized that the way somebody is painted in a family depends on who you're asking.
Yes.
And yeah, because people are complex and they're not, um, they might be villains to some people and heroes to other people. And I wanted her to be a character that you couldn't really pin down.
Mhm.
I still wanted her to be an empathetic character that people at times related to, or tried, or at least could understand. But I also wanted her to be a monster at times too, because sometimes that's how people are. And I think that's one of the things that I was thinking about when I was writing this book. It's like, what do you do with those family members who are very imperfect,
Mm,
who have done bad things? Where do you place them? How do we talk about them? How do we mourn them? How do we honor them?
absolutely. I know there were some parts where I was just thinking she's going to make the right choice. She's going to turn around and she's going to be the mother that you want her to be, and things would just turn for her over and over again. But there was another character in your book here. It's one, Miss Debbie, which is a little bit forward in the story here. Debbie went through sleep paralysis, which I kept thinking, sleep. What made you put that in the book?
Oh, I had actually had a whole story about sleep paralysis. My editor was like, I don't understand this, so I took it out. Um, but yeah, I've experienced sleep paralysis since I was in high school, really. And I, at one point when I was in college, because I guess it's like it's sort of fueled by anxiety. I think when I was in college and 9/11 happened, I was so stressed out, I was having it every day, every night, for a couple of years. So I was thinking about, it does feel like you're being haunted. You have these very vivid hallucinations that feel completely real. And so for people who don't know what sleep paralysis is, it's just that I guess your body wakes up from your REM sleep before your brain, or no, it's your brain before your body.
Yeah,
And
you're just
so
there.
yeah, so it's kind of like you're still dreaming, but you're awake. So you can have very very realistic hallucinations. And I read this book while I was writing this, and it was saying that the what you see when you have sleep paralysis is sometimes influenced by your culture.
Mm.
So yeah, so like a Japanese, like in Japan, a lot of the people who suffer from sleep paralysis have very specific visions, and those visions are based on their own folklore. And in other countries, it's similar. So what we see is probably based on our experience as Americans. But because Debbie is reading this book and she's kind of coming to terms with her family's legacy as like violent, slaveholders, I
Mm.
wanted, that to be her kind of way of connecting with those ghosts, like going through, sleep paralysis.
Wow. That part just kind of caught me. I was like, sleep paralysis, what?
Yeah, because my mother also used to experience it, and I one time I heard when I was little, I heard her talking on the phone to my grandmother, and she said that my grandmother told her that somebody was sitting on her chest at night, and I
I've
didn't know what
heard
that
that
meant.
before.
Yeah, I didn't know what that meant when I was little, but now that I'm adult and I've had sleep paralysis, it meant that she was having sleep paralysis too.
Mm.
And I was thinking about that, how that's something that's kind of passed down, and it could seem very like supernatural, if you don't know the science behind it.
Kind of heard that feeling of the, almost like the twindoms where you feel someone's pain or someone's that kind of thing. I definitely can relate to that. Uh, there was a part of that Debbie went through. She had this atonement or wanting, feeling so overwhelmed by her own family's history. And especially now we're in a place where we're in a time period where there are so many who feel as if they want to do something more or they want to make changes and atone for any past behaviors that their family or the history has provided. What advice? I have a question here that just came in. What are some ways that you've taken the knowledge that you've learned to break any of those negative generational curses? And what advice would you give to readers to motivate them to make the change? That's a great question.
I think once I recognized that people were haunted by things that happened in the past, and I didn't really recognize that till I was an adult. I think sometimes I would think of my parents as just like mean or angry.
Mm.
And now in retrospect, I realized that they were still experiencing a lot of trauma, based on things that happened to them, before we came to America. And so I could have more compassion for them. And I feel like I have a better relationship now because I could put that into perspective.
Hmm.
Um, so I think just recognizing that, and I think just learning to ask questions. Like I think when I was young, I was just like a snoop, and I would just listen and try to be a detective. But now that I'm older, I ask more questions. I kind of ask about their childhood. I ask about their relationships with people. I ask kind of just maybe even in an indirect way, I just give them the opportunity to talk about their pain, because that's something that I think we weren't raised to do. We were raised to be like tough and just to kind of, not cry about things and just like tuck things away. So I think I realized by me asking questions, probably like one of the few times that they really get to open up, especially my father. I think he'd never, I didn't realize, like, he never got an opportunity to talk about some of the things that happened to him when he was young. And when we started to go to Jamaica when I was older, that's when I started to understand him a little bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just asking questions, like letting people remember, asking questions about family, and acknowledging that people are complicated, and that we're all like haunted by, various things, and we're all human.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, is a big step.
The
And I think,
curiosity. Yeah.
oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think one of the things I wanted to kind of come across in the book is that it's not, you I can't forgive anybody on someone else's behalf. It's like
Mm.
whatever, the Abel Paisley character, even though he might have been a good husband to his current wife, he still has things to atone for with his previous
Yes.
wife. I can forgive you. I can forgive the things that people have done to me, but I can't dismiss the things that they've done to other people. And I
Mm.
think people have to kind of try to find that balance to acknowledge that they might be a villain to other people, but you can forgive them for yourself, but you can't dismiss, what they've done. You've got to let them, find their own way to atone for the things they've done.
And speaking of Abel, him waiting so long to reveal and even entrusting his secret with those who would hold on to it with him. I was kind of torn as well, feeling as if, why would you hold something so long and then wait until your children are adults and just surprise? Like, your daddy's not dead. Who does that? it was it was definitely kind of disconcerting at the same time, but it was also intriguing as to what made him think that moment was the right time. And it also made me think too of a lot of the things that are going on in our families' lives. Sometimes we may not ever get the answers to them. But what you mentioned about speaking up now and asking those questions, huge.
Yeah, I think also with a character like Abel and Vera too, I kind of wanted to think about kind of the gender norms and the expectations that our parents and our grandparents and our ancestors had to deal with. And, I wanted Abel to be a character who, he has this vision of masculinity in his head that society pushes on him, and he doesn't feel like he measures up. And he's so ashamed of that he just decides to run away instead of kind of confronting his own unhappiness. And I think I wanted Vera to be a similar character who doesn't necessarily want to be a mother and have children, but doesn't understand that there's a choice, doesn't feel like there's a choice. And yeah, I just wanted to have them both kind of show different ways that they were kind of pushing up against those boxes that they were in, even if it's not a good way. It's not a healthy way. They just they did what they knew how to do.
I know there's a part in the book he had mentioned that you wonder if there's someone out there who would wear your life better. It kind of makes you think too, like, what would someone else look like in my shoes? Would they go through the same experiences that I'm in? It kind of levels the playing field. And it made me have more compassion for the characters as I was reading them too, thinking, if I was in their situation, would I have made the same choices? I think that's a way to kind of look at it.
Yeah.
Now, there's another part in the book here too. You talk about a lot of different things in there, especially there's sexism in there, there's masculinity, there is. Um, I was really intrigued to do some history because you mentioned like the Rastafarian history and the colonial Jamaica, and I was like, oh, I need to learn more about this because didn't even think. Well, it's not what we normally see or we typically see in the movies or in books. And when you think of slavery, you think of antebellum South. You don't necessarily think of Jamaica, which I appreciate that. Were there other books that kind of touch on this same type of thing?
Like set in colonial
Set in
Jamaica.
colonial Jamaica? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are a lot of different writers who wrote about that time period. Yeah, I would say Roger Mace is one writer who's done that. I feel like now that you asked me, I'm blanking. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think Michelle Cliff is more like post-colonial Jamaica, but I mean, it's she still explores like colorism and the legacies of slavery and a lot of those different topics too.
And you kind of touched a little too on where foreign education in America. Let's say I have a lot of friends who have really high degrees in other countries. They come to America and they don't have the same accreditation, or they don't get valued the same. There was a part in the book where Irene had mentioned that, what did she say here? And the home health care was kind of equivalent to a maid here in America. And you kind of think about that too. Like, you have individuals who have a plethora of education behind them, and yet a language barrier may make them feel as if they're inferior, or make them have lower wages, or not provide them with the same opportunities. I think a lot of that definitely touches those who may be in the same situation, or who can relate to that too. Did you kind of draw from experiences that you've seen too?
Yeah, I think it was kind of inspired by my own kind of family's journey. I think, we're still, a lot of immigrants do come here with the idea that they're going to find the American dream and or achieve the American dream, and somehow your circumstances are going to be better than they were in the country that you left, and that's not always true. It might be true for your children, but not for you yourself. Whereas, when we lived in Jamaica, we owned our own house. We were kind of working class, but we had more. But then when we came here, we were poor,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
I think a lot of my other family who came after, they just kind of expressed like frustration about that, because they were bumping up against the same thing. They just felt like America was just constant work for very little. And what I found is that a lot of people some of my family members went back, and
Really?
kind of the desire to come here is not like, I think when I was young, like being, everybody would say you have to go over foreign, you have to go over foreign. Like, everybody wanted to come to America. And what I find with my younger cousins is that a lot of them don't want to come anymore. Um, because there are just more opportunities, or like more chances to have kind of like it's easier to achieve the middle class life there if you have education. Whereas here, sometimes, when my mother came to America, her high school degree like didn't count. Like, they just told her
Really?
she had to do it again.
Oh, wow.
So, and some of my other cousins or my aunts experienced the same thing. They had to, go to school and do their last year of high school again, for it to count, because they didn't want like a foreign diploma. So, my mother has been a home health aide since I was young. And so I think a lot of Irene's experiences are kind of based on, stories that my mother has told me.
Now, are there any of the characters that are in your book that you would like to have almost their own book by themselves? I can think of some that I would want to see just by themselves, have their own little book by themselves. Were there any that really spoke to you, said, this will be book number two, just you?
The Irene character, I think I do want to explore. Just, yeah, I'm writing a book now where I don't know if she's going to stay in the book, but she's in the book now. And it's with a group of immigrant women who are working as home health aides, in a wealthy retirement community. And it's kind of just exploring like what that economic situation kind of does to your life. Because I just felt, because a ton of people are home health aides, or
Yeah.
doing work in the medical field, but for low wages. And that I feel like that they're just always seemed invisible to me. I think, even
Mhm.
though they're so visible to me because my family members are doing that job. But yeah, I just growing up, I never heard about them talked about in like the mainstream at all.
Yeah. And they do such valuable work. They're essential workers, and
Yeah.
yet they're not paid like essential workers. So I have family members who are home health aides as well too. So I definitely relate. What There was a part in the book you had mentioned too about a segment on rising above your blackness. I think that kind of resonated throughout the book too, of these characters who wanted to be more than what they were, or wanted to achieve more than what people thought they should. One of the characters, well, actually, Abel, he was one who he kind of pulled me in two different directions, feeling as if he knew what he needed to do, he knew what he should do, but he knew it wasn't right for him. So rising above his blackness and getting enough to pay for his family and the needs that he had. I think that's something we kind of always battle within ourselves. Did you want to put that same inner battle within each of the characters, or was there one in particular that probably had more of a draw on or a battle between itself?
Well, I think the Vera character, I think she's the one. I think she's the one who has that kind of line. Because I kind of wanted to like have some of the characters be struggling with colorism,
Mm,
um, or not even struggling. I think very comfortable with colorism.
yeah.
But yeah, I think the Vera character is somebody who was raised to, because there is, it's just something that I observed when I was younger, especially being like my mother's side of the family being very light skinned and me being the darker skinned person. It's just something, an attitude that I noticed that wasn't always explicit, but that I could pick up on. And so I think I wanted Vera in the first section that we're introduced to her in to be having this kind of internal battle with the lessons or the values that colonialism
Yeah.
instills with her, and the lessons that she's or the values she's getting from witnessing the Rastafarian movement, witnessing Haile Selassie coming to Jamaica, and for the first time realizing that you don't have to hate being Black, you don't have to
Hmm.
hate that part of yourself, you don't have to try to suppress it. um, and so yeah, she's somebody, and that's just part of her story. It's not really all of her story, but I felt like if I was going to um, write something that kind of reflected um, the Jamaica that I knew, I had to kind of mention that, because that was something that I feel like stood out to me.
Yeah.
In my childhood, that internal kind of struggle with, this, like with I remember like White Teeth by Zadie Smith. I had read that in college, and I think one of the lines she has is something about like colonial subjects trying to be more British than the
Mm,
British. And I thought that was such a perfect way to put it, because I think that's something that I kind of witnessed sometimes with my own family, trying to just focus on I guess respectability politics, and
hmm.
project conform to this ideal that was never really meant for us.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I wanted Vera to be conscious of that struggle within her, and
You have
Abel
a
is just struggling against everything. Just
yes. Abel is on the struggle bus for sure.
yeah.
There was another character who had also another struggle. Estelle, she had issues, um, and I say that lightly, but she had issues, and it, even though the family surrounding her saw the issues that she had and felt as if there was no way to truly help her get past those things. Um, some of the parts of the book that you mentioned where she's on drugs, did you want that to? It seemed like that was a lot of who she was, but it I didn't really see how she got to be that way. Was there something that, and that I think that was probably me looking for her in a second book. Like, I want to know more about her and how she got to be this way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's funny because at one point I was writing like a whole screenplay about Estelle that I never finished. That was like one of my unfinished projects. But yeah, no, I think I wanted her to be a character who, even though she's raised in America, even though she's raised in kind of a secure environment, her parents are married as far as she knows.
Mm-hmm.
They own a store, a small business, they have their own home. You would think that she would be one of the better off characters, but I still wanted her to kind of represent, the still be haunted by those secrets in her own way. Like literally growing up, even though she doesn't know what's wrong, she knows something is wrong, and she can sense
Yeah.
that something's not right. So in the first chapter when Abel does confess she's the only one who's happy
I
about
knew
it
it.
because she could always tell that something wasn't right. And I think also I wanted her to be a character who was struggling against or rebelling against her parents' kind of hypocrisy, rebelling against
Mhm.
their gender expectations that they're trying to place on her, their demands for her to be just like them, and her wanting to be this artist and not
Yeah.
knowing kind of how to break away from them. So doing the most extreme things that she can do. So she's somebody who could be explored further, but yeah, she's kind of just like a hint of the character. I guess, I focused more on the beginnings and not as much on the like recent generation. We just get glimpses of them.
I loved it all. There was another part in there. It kind of made me laugh where there was siblings who have different versions of their childhood, and I have two siblings, two older sisters, and we can have the same experience, and it's a different story all the way around. It kind of made me think of that. Where there's some areas where within the book where you almost wanted to sound like it was telephone, where it kind of
Yeah.
changes from person to person.
And yeah, that's definitely when I wanted to kind of just show how how I learn about family history and what that experience is like. It's sometimes it is like a game of telephone. You hear a different version of the same story told by many different people, and you have to figure out what version is reality. And maybe you never will. Maybe they're both versions of reality. So in the book, Irene, she only knows her mother, Vera, as being abusive, whereas
Mhm.
her brother Vincent has a very different impression of his mother. He has a vision, a remembrance of his mother being abused, being the one
Yeah.
who is abused, and he doesn't see her as harsh or abusive at all,
Yeah.
and that's like a source of contention between them.
Speaking of Irene, I feel so bad for Bernard. I kept I kept wanting to say, "Oh, you guys really need to read the book." I know I'm talking about these characters like they're real people, but when you read the book, that's how you feel. Um, I've heard that some people kind of shy away from similar historical fiction where there's slavery. I know we don't have a lot of time to go through like 50 more of these questions, but the way that you write is so authentic and it weaves together a modern day and the colonial area in Jamaica where it's not overwhelming. And so I definitely thank you and applaud you for your work. You did fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
Fabulous. Now, what do we have next coming up for you, Miss Card?
I'm writing a book, but it also it keeps like changing very quickly depending on what mood I'm in. But it's something that as I said, I want to keep the Irene character in it, and I just wanted to explore like I guess Black women's relationship to labor, like,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of the way that's kind of changed over time. Yeah, and as some of the characters are home health aides. Yeah, and it's kind of just I can't even say what kind of book it is now because it keeps changing.
Well, hey,
Sometimes
whenever
it's
you have it, when
yeah.
it's done, let us know. We'd be happy to have you back and talk about it and tell all the viewers all about it. So thank you for sure for everything. And one final question here. Let me see if I see it in the chat here. Someone asked, who is the best person to read the books? Is it more for young adults or is it for adults or can anyone kind of read the book?
It's targeted toward adults. I guess definitely. I read adult books when I was a teenager, and yeah, anybody who feels like they're mature enough to read it and has their parents' permission can read it. But yeah, there are a lot of mature themes in there. Yeah, so it's definitely not the target audience, but I definitely think like high school kids can definitely process it too.
Love it, love
But
it.
yeah, adults.
And since you are the writer, I'm sure your local library has plenty of copies of your book.
Yeah, yeah, because I actually wrote this while I was working as a librarian.
Really?
Yeah, so yeah.
That's good because I know my library was. I looked for this book and they had two copies. I said, "Why? They need more."
Yeah, I'm still a librarian. I'm just like taking a break, but yeah, I was a librarian, and that helped a lot with the research part of the book too.
Oh, that is great. Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time to speak with us today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did too.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
thank you. And like I mentioned, when you come with the next book or even another edition, you have this book coming out in paperback. So you guys definitely check the book out and get it if you don't have it already, because I've
Yeah.
already warned you. Get the book for sure and read it. You will love it. Love it, love it, love it. So I always like to end with a quote that I find from a Black author. And there was one in particular that kind of spoke to me today. Where is it? And this one was by Audre Lorde. It said, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched unto other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. And I kind of felt as if redefining the story and histories of who we are as a people starts with writing. And it starts
Yeah.
with the narrative that we put out there in the universe. And so thank you for adding your voice to the other amplified voices that are out there that are breaking ground and breaking barriers. So thank you again. And for all of our viewers here, you can follow us on bookmecca.org. You can follow us on Instagram at book.mecca, Facebook, Bookmecca of Texas. And if you want to find out more about Miss Card, you can go to her website at maisycard.com. And you can also go to our event page and has all of her information for Twitter and Instagram. You can follow her and please support independent bookstores. Please support Black authors and their work because we are doing this for the culture. So thank you all so much for attending. And we look forward to next month. Next month we have, before I let you guys go, we have Trey Anthony. So she'll be on next month with you guys. Black love and all that good jazz. So you guys have a wonderful night. And thank you again, Maisy, for being with
Thank
us.
you.
And look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for watching. Thank you.
Bye, guys.